It's an honor to be voted by your peers. There's 50 well, there's really 51 because of the District of Columbia, but there's 51 people that serve in the position that I serve across the United States, and they nominated me, and the board voted to allow me to serve as president of the board, beginning vice president this year, president of the board next year, and I'm very honored that they think enough of me to allow me to serve in the role currently and next year. Uh, but they probably felt sorry for me because I was getting old, and they knew I'd probably retire soon. So I don't know. Well, I already represent Alabama on the board. I represent Alabama. I serve as the chairman of the National Federation Board. So I represent Alabama on the two boards of the National Federation of High Schools. And for those who don't know who the NFHS is, it's similar to the NCAA. And for collegiate athletics, it's the governing body of high school sports. They provide all the rules that the games are played by. Each state makes its own playing rules. For example, a transfer rule or an outside participation rule. But the NFHS, the game rules, are all made through a collaborative agreement between all the states. So in serving in this position, I would serve, again, this year as the vice president of the board, next year as president. And my job would be to travel the country and visit with other state associations while still working in this job. And do that, I would be gone literally for 2 months as I went to each section of every state and went through meetings, helped develop policy for the national association, and whatever else they asked me to do. We set priorities every year. The board of directors, we establish what we are trying to do as an organization. All of that's changed with COVID because now, some of our directives now have changed. The purpose of the NFHS, in addition to the rules, is to promote activities and athletics and student participation. And that is always a primary goal, to find more ways to allow students to participate, to provide more ways to recognize students, understanding the value of the mission of the association, which is educational athletics. What we do through that organization is provide guidance. They provide best practices, knowing that one size does not fit all. What you do in California might be completely different what you do in Georgia. So the NFHS has a medical advisory board, and every state has the opportunity to nominate people from their state to serve on that board. We used to have Dr. Larry Lemack served 2 terms on that board for the Alabama High School Athletic Association. But that board establishes guidelines, but clearly states it has to fit in with the mission of each state association. And then each state association has their own medical advisory board. So they evaluate that information and create best practices for us. Well, we have to always look at the risk versus reward of what we do. And as long as we're in school and our kids are back to some sense of normalcy, I will say this: we all have to learn how to live with the virus. The virus is not going away until hopefully, after we develop a vaccine, whenever that would be. Our kids are going to get involved. They're going to be with someone. I went by Sonic the other day. There were 60 kids having a good time, but they were all out there. We had a volleyball tournament in Huntsville with 340 teams from 24 states. We had a baseball tournament in Daphne, Alabama with 4,000 people. There was a wrestling tournament in Birmingham last week with over 500 people. So our kids are going to be involved. In each of those cases I just mentioned, I would dare to say that the guidelines by the Department of Public Health were not being followed like our kids will follow in working through our association, our coaches have done a great job. I would rather have our kids, the ones whose parents choose to let them play, because it's still a parental right. Nobody is forced to play. Those that want them to let them play be under the guidance of our folks. They've done a great job since June. Since June, we've had cases of COVID, but they follow the guidelines of, isolating or, quarantining. They placed a kid and they're back, and we really haven't had many cases. So it's worked out pretty well. But on most of those cases, where they all came from is what they did outside of school. Athletics is not what's causing our issues. We've gotten to where we are today without having interscholastic athletics. So I do believe by our kids wearing masks, physical distancing, under the influence of professional educators, we will provide a mitigated athletic experience. We're not going to eradicate the virus, but we will help mitigate it by some game rules being changed, but we're still allowing those kids to participate. And the physical, mental, and social well-being of our kids being home by themselves, it really concerns me. So you look at the risk versus reward. The great part about it is our age group of student is the least affected age group. But someone like myself, who's had a heart condition, who is 67 years old, I have to be very careful when our grandchildren, Beth and I both do, when our grandchildren go back to school. We have to take precautions so they can live their life, because they don't want grandma and grandpa to get exposed. So if we all do this, if we all do our part, our children can return to their childhood. They're not coming back. Our kids don't get a second chance. What happened last March with our spring sports, I really felt horrible for those kids. But the governor and the State Department of Public Health shut all things down. They've learned a lot since that time. They found there are other ways that we can deal with this virus and live with this virus. So I'm thankful that our kids will get some semblance of a season. Not everybody will play. Not everybody will play every week. There's no penalty if you don't play, but it provides an opportunity. If our schools or our students get 5 games in, that's 5 games they wouldn't have had if we'd just said, no, we're not going to play. If they miss a week, there's no penalty. There's nothing, they're not being fined. There's no probation. We've made every exception to be flexible that we can possibly make just to give some semblance of a season to our students. As I've said all along, I respect everyone's opinion regarding whether you should play, whether you should not play. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's what's best for you and what, based on the information you have. We have school systems that have higher cases of COVID in their community. If some of them are not playing fall athletics period, we respect that because it's right for their community. We have other communities that have very few cases. It's right for their communities. We have some school systems that are only offering a traditional model to return to school. That's right for their community, and we respect their opinion on that. But 99% have been positive. There have been coaches that have reached out to me and said they have a concern about coming back. And as we've said, if you have a concern in your community, we encourage you not to play until you feel comfortable playing. Alabama, long before Steve Savarese, has always been a leader nationally. And I say this in a humble perspective. That's probably why they elected me to serve in the position, because they do respect what Alabama's footprint is regarding athletics in our state. So we'll bring many of the policies, procedures We're not going to try to influence anyone. We hope everybody would look at best practices from every state. We look at what other states do to learn the errors they made, the positives they had, and every one of us try to take things from each other's state. So we will always offer what we have to any state that inquires. But I think Alabama has stood for a long time. They've done this association long before Steve again has done a great job. It's well respected nationally, and a lot of what we do, I'm sure people will inquire. But the NFHS always makes decisions what's best for the most. You know, whenever my ego would get in the way of an accomplishment, I go home and my wife will definitely humble me very quickly. But what I've learned is that I'm the luckiest guy alive. To spend your entire life working with kids through sport, educating kids not only in the classroom, as I started out as a biology teacher and a coach, but also educating them through sport, now having the the opportunity I have through the association. I'm the one that's been blessed. I have been just more than blessed and fulfilled. Even though in this job I don't make everybody happy every single day, I can sleep at night knowing that I'm following the guidelines established by this board and upholding them in a consistent basis. And I've probably learned more from this job than any other job I've had, because it's been a very challenging job. But this has been great for Steve Savarese, not because of serving at any national level. This job, I truly believe, has made me a better person. And that in itself is very fulfilling for me personally.